live, and thank you everyone who's listening in for tuning in to another episode of the Tale Continued podcast, the companion podcast series that pairs with the Crusader's Tale independent TV show. So we thank you for being here. We appreciate your support, and we're excited to have another special feature here for you today. With me on this podcast, we've got two special guests coming. The first special guest here is Andrea Wallace Noble, who helped out in season 2, episode 5, with a really cool scene that we did involving Caspian the horse. So with that, I'll turn it over to you and give you a brief chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Andrea. I'm a resident horse girl and proud of it. It came in handy for this season. I am an aspiring Disney princess and fairy tale hero. My day job is working at a nature center, and I love to fill that with fantasy. I would just say a general theme for me always is fantasy. I love it in my content. I love creating fantasy. I love cosplay. I'm a character performer. So I was really excited for a chance to help contribute to the series, even if not high fantasy, a period piece to engage imaginations and inspire viewers. So I was happy to help Brad out when he asked.
I mean, I really appreciated the help. I guess that's something I would definitely speak to, is like the appreciation side of things. You see, me and the producers, we were having a conversation in May after we filmed a couple of the first scenes for season 2, and one of the producers said something about, what are the chances that we get you on a horse? Because your character's a knight is on a horse, what are the chances of that? And he was teasing, like he wasn't actually really being serious. He was kind of just sort of razzing. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I could start asking around. And then one thing led to another. And then it was friends of friends, people that are in theater or film. And to my complete surprise, we actually, we connected through mutual friend Catherine and or Kat, I suppose.
Yeah.
She goes by Kat, but that was a super lucky break, because that was awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. So
well, and that was kind of years in the making, because growing up, some horse girls dream of like riding their horse in the Olympics or those really great feats. My dream was to ride my horse bareback and bridleless through field, wearing a princess gown with a sword. And so that's always what I've been aspiring to. Okay. So ever since I got Caspian, I was like, he's got to get used to gowns and swords. Yeah. And so like on the daily, whenever I had the opportunity to ride him with a sword, like practice jousting games, do all of the really cool stuff that you see in film, I took advantage of it. So Kat had actually reached out to me about a year before we shot that scene. And she was like, hey, I got to model this dress, and it would be so cool to have someone wear it next to a horse. I got this friend in mind. Do you think we could set something up? I was like, absolutely. Yeah. This is what I live for. So she'd already witnessed like Caspian around lots of fabric, swords, the like photography scene. Yeah. So I was really glad that she was able to connect us, because that fits exactly in that realm of why have a horse if you're not doing really cool medieval stuff with them.
I mean, heck yeah. Agreed. I mean, it's so cool. Like, I have to point out how awesome it looked with the barding, which was custom made. Like, you hand sewed that.
Yeah, why have a horse if you can't put it in barding? There you go. I'm an avid thrifter for eco-friendly reasons, but also I feel like it sparks creativity to take a piece that had one story and take it to another. So I'd always wanted some kind of barding or armor for Caspian, and this was a great excuse to finally sit down and sew it, which was actually my first sewing project. So it was pretty ambitious.
Really?
But it's really not too hard if you think about it. Sure. It's like sewing triangles. And because it's on a horse who's moving and won't have any straight lines to start with, it was very forgiving. So like none of the triangles are the exact same size. Sure. None of the lines are exact. But it didn't matter, because like it was blowing in really strong wind and looked great in the end. And I was so glad that your character had red, because that really popped on his bay coat.
Yeah.
So it worked out great.
I mean, I appreciate the effort and the thought that went into that. Like that was a level of detail that we really just were not prepared to necessarily add in. So the fact that you could do that was it was really generous, and we appreciate that. So thank you.
Well, it was a great reason.
Thanks. Oh my gosh. Like, because I remember getting there, and I know you'd sent a message about a week before. Hey, I'm doing this barding. Oh wow, that's awesome. Thank you. You know, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't know what that even looked like. Because I don't know that much about horses, so I just totally blank going in, and then I saw it. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, this is exactly what I would imagine or hope for.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I'd like to think that Caspian felt cooler wearing it. Like, he stood a little extra taller.
Yeah.
He was like, wow, I really do look so handsome right now.
Oh, he was dapper.
Yeah, he thought he was the real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because we did a riding lesson, which I found really helpful, just to get comfortable. I mean, I'll admit I was actually scared.
I actually appreciate that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where people reach out to me because they know I have a horse, and I'm always happy to share because I know having a horse is a privileged position. If they're like, I want to ride your horse, and I've galloped before, and I'm an expert, and that's always like red flag in my mind because I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about,
Right.
and you would be like, it would be unsafe for you to ride my horse with that expectation. And I told Brad from the get-go that Caspian's not the most patient horse, and he wasn't for filming day either. But I was like, we're willing to make it work. So it was really good that we were able to test run it, and that you were able to feel a little more comfortable, and Caspian got to know you, and that like we knew what the expectations were. Like we knew it would be a match and would be safe, because that was always the priority, especially with you in Metal Gear. We didn't want you coming off. We wanted it to be very, very safe for all parties.
I mean, I appreciated the attention on safety that way, and I mean, even just from the character standpoint too. Like William, my character, he's going off to war. He's totally scared. For all intents and purposes, he thinks he's probably not coming home. He's probably going to die, because that was pretty much the norm with medieval soldiers. Many would not come home, and so like that fear translated, which was good because it was actually real. It was raw emotion. Because I'm sitting on the horse like, oh man, I don't want to fall off, and William's kind of fidgeting, like he has this on-screen bond with what is his horse. Like there's a level of care and love there between person and animal, the same way that someone has that bond with their cat. I guess. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of channeled that too. Like I was thinking about my cat Brody during that time, and I was like, well, treating Caspian like Brody here, like he's my best bud, and it just I think it worked.
It did work, and I appreciated too your attention to detail. Like you wanted to be authentic in the way you held the reins and sat on the horse. And every horse girl watches a film like every other nerd does, and they're like, my specific hobby was not represented well. Like, oh my gosh, that person was riding with their posture wrong, and you would never hold the reins like that.
Right.
So I felt so validated, like being able to give you that feedback, and you were so receptive and eager to learn, that I think we're able to make a very authentic piece.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, it's, for sure my mindset was, well, if you're being generous and letting us use a horse, that's not a small request. So I thought, well, if you're putting in all the time and effort to make it look really good, then I have to bring the best performance to the table, because then it makes it worth your time, because then you get something out of it for your resume in the creative aspect. And then it just makes it look better for the viewer. The viewer can kind of suspend disbelief. I think that was probably the main thing I was cognizant of, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that day had really hard filming conditions too, because I told you that Caspian had just moved to this barn, which I love dearly, but he was going through a very anxious phase, which thank goodness he's settled in now. But like during the day of the shoot, he was very frantic. And he made it very clear, and it was also as hot as it could possibly be. And it was windy, which like wind plus forces equals frantic energy. Right. So we were working with a lot, and we still managed to get the shots. I mean, your cameraman was so creative, and you were so patient, and we just worked with Caspian and figured it out.
I mean, like everyone was very, very nice about it, which I appreciate. I do remember it being very hot because there was one moment where, and this has happened a few times on set, where because the armor is heavy and it is exhausting, and it's a total of 3 times that I've seriously wondered if I was going to pass out on set.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be totally honest, like the one we filmed on the top of this big hill that basically on top of a mountain, out in Wisconsin, at this place called Gibraltar Rock. We filmed a fight scene in season 1, and during that I had to lay down for a while because it was just so hot. And then when we filmed the battle scene for season 2, that was pretty rough. And then the scene with Caspian too, and like everyone was doing a great job being attentive and trying to keep the safety up, but just it was so hot that I remember having to sit down at one point and just, oh, I gotta take a breather, like my back's killing me, like whoa. It's crazy.
Yeah, and horseback riding uses muscles that you don't normally use either, so it's a lot to manage, like a sword, a shield, chainmail, 90 plus degrees and a heat index, and also think about like acting at the same time. Yeah, but it's always worth it.
It was, I mean, it was fun. In so many ways it was fun. I mean, not even just like the, oh, this is cool factor, but even just, hey, I'm learning a skill. This is something that, like, I think it literally is like a resume builder. Because, I mean, a lot of jobs and stuff, they'll even ask, what's an incident where you've overcome something that you never thought you could do? And that's the perfect example nowadays. Like, it's a good interview question.
Right.
Just like, what were you scared out of your mind to do, and what did you, like, yeah, man, I rode a horse. I thought I was going to fall and bust my neck, like, like happens.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad that you have like a healthy respect for them too, because you're right, it's like a 1,200-pound animal, and it takes most people like years, decades to develop that skill. So we were definitely like not crash coursing it in an unsafe way, but like getting what we needed to get the shot and be realistic and be safe. And like I think we managed to like hit all the boxes.
We did, and I mean, a large part of that is because we only did walking, which was good because it was very safe. And it was also helpful that you were able to literally hold the reins and keep him in check.
Caspian needed it on that day.
Well, he was squirrely. I mean,
he was ready to go into battle. He was like, why are we waiting here? Let's go. Like, where's the other horses?
Yeah. I mean, it was great, but he was so antsy, and like it sold well because it fit the vibe that we needed. But yeah, it's like it was very carefully edited.
And I was amazed at that. I watched it back and I was like, wow, you would never even know that I was like holding him and tucked around corners, and like, it was really well done. Yeah,
we couldn't see you because either you were hidden behind his head, or there was one shot where if you look really, really closely for like a single frame, you can see
an Easter egg.
Like there's like the red of the shirt that you had on.
Oh yeah.
For like a single frame, but it blends so well because of the barding that it's only a frame right before it cuts to black. That if people really look, they could probably find it.
Now you'll know, viewers.
Yeah, go look for it. If you find it, there's a prize.
Andrea had one screen of one frame of screen presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but like it blended so well that like that was expertly edited by Zach, and I mean, you did so well at just like being there and helping, and yet not breaking the fourth wall, which I was impressed at how that worked out.
And we were talking about that day that in most film, horses are always neighing, and it bothers me because most of the time horses don't neigh. Like, they're nonverbal communicators, and there's not usually a reason for them to neigh. And as I was saying this and like getting on my high horse about it, what does Caspian do? It starts neighing because he's so worked up. So we got some real neighs to put in there. So it was justified in this scene because he was actually neighing. So can reassure all horse girls listening that it was authentic. It was not manufactured.
I mean, I appreciate that, and hopefully the listeners who own horses do as well. I mean, because the viewers are going to like that because they would expect there to be a neigh, and they get it.
So they do get it. It's the happy medium.
Yeah. It wasn't like constant though, so
Right.
that was nice.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I mean, so that was super cool. Um, yeah, the stable owner, really nice guy.
He was so excited about it.
Really?
Yeah, and I think he was
Okay.
like trying to be subtle about it, but he was like really proud that his barn was being used for something like that.
Okay.
So I'm really glad.
Well, he's gonna love this because even though Caspian's only in episode 5, and you know, that's where we credit you and Kat and a couple others who had helped out with that process of making the horse scene happen. But throughout the whole season, we have like the credit sequences of community partners and stuff like that. And I mean, we do mention the stable in each of the 5
Oh,
episodes
that's wonderful.
as like one of the sponsors of the whole season.
Uh-huh.
So they're gonna get some extra
Yay.
publicity.
Yeah, that's great and well deserved. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, he was so generous about that, and I mean, like those partnerships are huge to actually make this thing happen because you know, like places that'll let us film in a rustic location that you know is an open field. I mean, there's not much green space left in the modern world.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
like when
true.
you find it, it's like you gotta
jump on it.
yeah. So there is that. Yeah, but so I guess I'm curious about giving the listeners a chance to learn just a little bit more about your background with horses and how I guess like tell me the story of how you got Caspian.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I like this. So my first word was horse. I think I was always destined to be on this path. And I think you are born a horse girl. So I was pretending to like ride horses before I could even walk. So my parents knew they were in for it. So they were very generous. They signed me up for riding lessons. Actually, when I was 8, I was visiting my great uncle, as everyone has great uncle, way up north in Wisconsin. And it's very rural, and everyone's got animals all over the place and farms and stuff. And that weekend, we were just sitting down over dinner. He says, "Hey, Andrea, would you like a horse?" 8-year-old Andrea says, "Well, yeah, of course I want a horse." He's like, "Well, the neighbor just had this filly that was born this weekend, and I said I could trade a year's of mowing his lawn for this horse, and you could have it." And I was like, "Whoa!" And like as an 8-year-old, I didn't like think to look at my parents, whose like jaws were dropped and like panic in their eyes because he had to run it by them first. And they're like,
that.
"We like can't afford a horse. Like we don't want a horse. We were just doing lessons. Like this is totally different. This is a foal. Like our daughter is 8. What are we gonna do about this?" But he kind of corners them into it, and they ended up with a horse.
Okay.
And at that point, I had been taking lessons, but like I'm not an expert.
Sure.
So when this horse becomes old enough to ride, we move it down to Rockford, where we live, and we learned together, which was really interesting. And it's a miracle that honestly neither of us got hurt, because it's a filly who's learning how to be like ridden and how to exist, and a girl who's like not an expert, not a trainer. But that was really special, and she was an excellent horse. I lost her in college, unfortunately, so I had a spell where I was leasing different horses, which is kind of like renting a car where you like pay a monthly fee and you ride them. I was lessons different horses, but I didn't really get to make that connection till I met Caspian.
Yeah.
And that story is interesting too, because when I started my horse search, kind of like a house search, you've got criteria.
Yeah.
So I said, I want a horse that's not bay, the color he is. I want a horse that's over 16 hands, which is the measurement they use to measure horses. Can I do a sidebar for this?
Please.
So, okay.
I'm so interested.
Horses are measured in hands, and this is a measurement that's like roughly the width of your 4 fingers. So it's about 4 inches. It is 4 inches, but like not everyone's hand is 4 inches. And you would start at their hoof and like stack your hands going up to their withers, which is kind of like the horse's shoulder where their neck meets their back.
Okay.
And you measure there because if you measure to the top of their neck, well, that's always moving up and down. So you measure from hoof to withers by hands. And I said, I want a horse that's 16 hands or taller because I'm tall.
Sure.
And I didn't want a quarter horse because that's the most common breed of horse in America. So I've got this pipe dream that I could get like a really cool breed of horse, like find the right circumstance or a cool color. And my friend was like, "Hey, you really need to try this horse. I've met him before. Like, I own his sister, and I think he's the right horse for you. Like,
Okay.
him and his current owner get along fine, but they're not like that perfect match. I think he's your match. I was like, no. Helpfully harassing me about it, and then I was like, fine, I'll try it, but I'm not gonna like him. I get on him, and it's like instant connection.
Yeah.
And so I'm riding him kind of in disbelief, and he is just so sweet, and he's giving me his all. I ride him inside, I ride him outside. I'm trying to like push every button to see if I can find a fault to justify not getting this horse.
For sure. Yeah.
Then I get off of him, and he kisses me on my cheek.
Oh.
And I was like, oh. But then I still have one card at my sleeve, one more button I could press. I was like, well, he's never jumped before, and I want to jump, so he probably is not going to work. And the owner was like, well, why don't you try jumping him? Like, bring out some jumps next time. We'll see. And I was like, okay, well, it's not going to work. Bring out the jumps, point him at it. He's never jumped ever in his life. Has never even seen a jump. Clears it. He thinks it's so much fun.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh, as we're going over the jump, I'm like, I have to buy this horse.
Because it was like you could tell that the connection was there.
The connection was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I have a 15-3 bay quarter horse, which is exactly what I didn't want.
Yeah.
But technically he's 15-3 and a half, so maybe you could round it up to 16 hands. And he doesn't look like a traditional quarter horse. So sometimes I can lie and say like, oh, he's an American warm blood, he's an appendix. But you can't deny that he's a bay. But I've really fallen in love with that color now that I've owned him. Yeah. So
I mean, he is a handsome animal. Like,
he really thinks he is too. Yeah.
I could tell when I met him that he was showing off for me, actually. I could tell that.
Yeah, he's got a personality for sure. He's the most like clever and engaged horse I've ever owned, which is why I love trick training him, because he's so motivated. So he's always trying to like play a game, solve a puzzle. He wants to interact with you, and he's not necessarily like cuddly, but he just wants to like always have input, always be engaged, always be connecting in some way. And he really does want to please.
Okay.
Or entertain.
Or both.
Yeah, at the same time. Yeah.
I mean, that's sweet. Like that's really, really special that that you found the right match that way with the horse. And, I mean, it's so obvious that I could tell when you were sharing a lesson, you know, explaining some of the ins and outs of riding, like the basics and stuff. You know, as I was watching, it's obvious. Oh, yeah, this is like a horse and rider, totally a package deal. Like you can just tell.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you were such a saint because you experienced part of that, where if someone who's not me rides Caspian and tries to steer him, he boomerangs right back to mom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no matter what. And you could be asking like with the right cues and telling him what to do in the correct way, and he'll be like, but you are not my mom.
Right.
And he goes right back. He's like, this person's on me, and I don't think that's right. And he like tolerates it, but he's always just a little skeptical.
Yeah. I think that's amazing, because it's like it speaks to the bond. I mean, you know, I would briefly sidebar that like I can understand where when it's the right animal for that connection, you just know. You know, I know cats are different than horses, but
it's still a connection with an animal.
Yeah, I mean, because like when I found my cat Brody, you know, I was dead set on I was going to go into a shelter and I was going to find a black kitten specifically, and that was going to be it. Could not have my mind changed. I had a name picked out and everything, which I had picked the name Jack Panther, like Black Panther, the superhero. Like, you know, because I just saw Black Panther, loved the movie, loved Chadwick Boseman, and so I wanted that. And then I saw Rhodey, the gal I was seeing at the time. She was the one that actually pointed him out, and she was like, "Did you see Brody?" It's like, "Oh no, I didn't." And then, you know, like I had these big sad green eyes.
Oh.
So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna pet him."
What color is Brody?
So he's orange and white. He's like an orange creamsicle.
So not a black kitten.
No, yeah, no, and he's extremely fat. He's like morbidly obese for a cat.
I think you showed me pictures. Yeah.
Oh, he's chunky. He's a big, like, he was like 25 pounds, and he's down to like 20 now. But
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, he's a hungry boy. But yeah, I mean, it just like I knew right then and there that I had to get Brody, and there is no better companion animal. It does not exist.
Yeah.
He's not
So special. Yeah. And you really do have like animal soulmates in that way where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is the animal that I'm meant to be with right now.
That's my Brody. That's your Caspian.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So.
It's interesting too what like traits animals either compliment us on or like share with us too. And I feel like my connection with Caspian is too close to evaluate like where we're complementary and where we're the same, but like it definitely aligns where
Yeah.
like people just find their right animal.
I mean, I just think that's so special. And like, you know, the process of you finding Caspian as if you were shopping for a house is fascinating on its own. Because, I mean, I don't know if people would. I know I certainly wouldn't have realized that it's that involved.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's very involved, and there's like you would do a house inspection, you do a vet check ahead of time to make sure like the horse is what we call sound, like that they are moving well and that they're healthy, and so it's a really long, extensive process.
Sure.
And I was he's shopping for so many horses, but he was actually the first one that I tried, and he sealed the deal for me. I didn't have to keep shopping. So I was very fortunate that it lined up that way. And his owner was very supportive of the transition,
Okay.
has stayed in touch. So I'm really glad that I have her blessing too on this stage of his journey.
Well, that's sweet. And I know you've mentioned that Caspian has a fan club.
Yeah, he does have a fan club. And I think that goes back to his personality and just how animated he is.
Yeah.
I share him with two other riders, so three of us go out and visit him, and he needs that much attention. He loves it. But I'm so fortunate all my friends support my hobbies, and they all genuinely love coming and seeing Caspian. So he's got like many aunts, many uncles. They love to
Yeah.
bring him apples and carrots and yeah, he just loves it. And I think the more people, the more entertained he is. So he's not at all daunted by like 7 people looking at him. He's like, oh, they're all here for me? Thank you.
He's soaking it up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely a showman in that way.
I love it. I love it. So I do want to ask one question here.
Yes.
I know we have another special guest that we're going to bring on in just a moment here, but so I'm curious for the listeners' benefit. What would you say is most important about caring for a horse and making sure that they're healthy? What does that involve? Like, what does that look like to actually keep a horse fed and in good shape?
Yeah, so much. And there's kind of 2 ways you can do it. You can either do it all yourself, which is so admirable, or you board a horse. So you pay to keep them at a spot where they are cared for. And they both have their pluses and downsides. For my lifestyle, it made sense for me to board Caspian. So,
Yeah.
I mean, like looking for a house, you have to really vet the stable that you're going to and looking at like their care regimens and the like safety of their pastures and their turnout schedules. But for example, when I moved Caspian to this new barn, he was moving off of like a pasture setup where he was on a dry lot of almost gravel and he ate hay all the time.
Yeah.
And he was transitioning to a gorgeous emerald green pasture, which is every horse owner's dream. And you have to do it by 15-minute increments a day. Otherwise, horses have such a reaction to the sugar in the grass that they can get like stomach conditions called colic and die.
Whoa.
Like high stakes, and
Oh my
it's
God.
just grass. And it depends on like how cold the nights are in the spring for how much sugar is trapped in the grass. So every day it was like Caspian's up to 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and it took weeks to transition him onto being on a full grass pasture. But when you have a horse who's like such a dear animal to you and also such an expensive animal, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna take it really slow.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have no idea that it was that. Let's use the word involved. I mean,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
And in some ways you think like, how would this animal survive in the wild? But it's really us humans trying to manufacture what's already in the wild. Like in the wild, they would have a slow reintroduction to grass as it came into season from like winter to spring.
Yeah.
But when we're like taking one horse from winter conditions straight to spring, we have to like simulate that transition. So there's a lot of thought that goes into every aspect of horse care.
I mean, I believe that. Like, you know, I can just imagine how many hours go in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So my main job is just exercising him, which is the fun part.
Sure.
But even that, like one trip up to the barn is like 3 to 4 hours, and that's multiple times a week just to maintain that connection and like learn how to listen to him and his nonverbal cues, like for his health, his wellness, his well-being, and just really keying into his needs and advocating for him.
I mean, that's special and admirable. I mean, good on you for putting in that much effort, because that is, I mean, that is no small feat to care for an animal like that deeply. Like that is, it's really sweet, actually.
And I do think like there's such a joy in working with an animal, and some people do it with their pets, but like pets are great for companionship. And then there's this added layer of like, you're trusting this animal with your life, you're trusting them to do a job, you have to accomplish a task together. That's why horseback riding is like the only time I'm ever fully present. It's my form of meditation, because you have to be so tuned into this animal and you're always having this dialogue, but you can't have it with words. So it really demands your full attention and your full self whenever you're there.
I mean, that is amazing. I mean, it makes sense, because I mean, one wrong move and of course you could get hurt, or even just the other side of things, you want to make sure the animal is properly healthy and cared for. I can imagine.
But it's so worth it. And I'm so grateful that other people love spending time with Caspian, or love seeing horses in cinema, or appreciate horses, and that I get the opportunity to do that every week, because I know that's a huge privilege. And so that's why I'm always happy to share.
Cool. I mean, I really, really appreciate that. You know, so thank you. And I mean, on behalf of the viewers too, thanks for helping us make this a reality. And
I'm so excited for the things that we brainstorm too, whenever they come.
Yeah, we do have some big things on the horizon, which that actually is a perfect segue. I could not have planned that better myself. So what I'm going to do for the listeners' benefit here, I'm going to pause this real quick, and then we're going to bring on our second guest here. So one brief moment, we're going to cue some music, and then we're going to jump into the next thing here. So stand by. So the recording is resumed for the listener's benefit. We're going to cue that music right back in and resume with our episode here. So on the second half of the podcast here, we have a second special guest. This would also be the first time we've ever done that, which is exciting. So our second special guest that we have here with us today is Brendan Noble, a fantasy book author, and also Andrea's husband. So
thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man, for sure. I guess, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself, give me a little bit on your background, and maybe if you're cool with sharing with the listeners, how did you two meet?
Sure. So like you said, I'm a fantasy author. I have 13 published books. My main series are The Realm Reachers and the Frostmarked Chronicles. I tend to write epic fantasy that is inspired by a lot of either Polish history or Polish mythology, and then kind of taking that and putting it in my own worlds. It's just it's an area that we don't see a lot of inspiration from in fantasy, and so I want to play around with that a lot. I explore sometimes politics, but like some of the gray areas of stuff sometimes I enjoy. And so I've been publishing and writing for about 6 years now. It's been a fun process. And so Andrew and I met in college. Well, actually, we kind of met before college. We were in we were both in a incoming freshman ask questions group, and I was one of the sophomores that was kind of answering, being helpful to like, oh, you can go to this building for this and stuff like that. And we had talked about a favorite article of clothing, and she had talked about hiking shoes that had wings on them. And nice. we talked about hiking, and then I'd answered a lot of questions for her, and we ended up messaging a lot over the summer. And
I know pretty quickly if I'm gonna like someone or not, and within like the first week of us like casually chatting back and forth, I was like, this is a really cool guy. And then like 2 weeks into us being on campus, he's like, do you just want to date? And I was like, well, yeah. We already kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
And then like a couple weeks into that, like our college definitely had like a high marriage pressure environment, but we were both like, we could probably get married. And we're like,
Okay.
yeah, probably. And then like right after college, we're like, yeah, we're gonna get married. And we did. And 5 years later, like it was just so easy. It was really meant to be. It was like walking right upon my soulmate. So
Yeah. So
Congratulations. And when you know, you know.
yeah,
Exactly.
That's kind of how it worked out. for
sometimes
us, so.
friends ask like, how did you find someone who's like such a good match or like such a great guy? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I wasn't looking, so I have no recommendation.
Yeah, neither of
It was
us
great.
went into that conversation looking for that.
No,
So
not at all.
just-
Yeah, it just happened. But I'm so grateful, and I'm so grateful that we get to share like all of our nerdy passions together and our love of fantasy and just explore the world in that creative way.
Yeah, you dragged me to Rockford, and
I did. I said Rockford or bust. That was the only like hard term of our
yeah,
relationship.
it really was.
We had to end
And
up
so-
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And which college did you go to?
A really small liberal arts school in Michigan called Hillsdale College. Although we'd like to sometimes add a disclaimer that Hillsdale is like very politically active right now, and we don't necessarily associate with the politics of Hillsdale.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's totally fair. I mean, and of course, that's a hot button thing, so
Yeah.
I get it. But I mean, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I guess I'm dying to know more about the storytelling capabilities that you guys have. And, I mean, there's a lot that goes into writing books and the costume stuff as well.
Character performance.
Yes. So I definitely want to know all about that. I guess Andrew, we'll start with the character performance costumes and then segue to the books, if that's cool. So
Yeah. So one of my jobs is that I get to bring magic to the community by portraying a lot of beloved characters. So think about like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Belle, Snow White. I portray these princesses as accurate as I can to what media has been made about them. And we do that for birthday parties. We do that for balls with hundreds of guests. We do that for community events like the city's annual Christmas celebration with thousands of people. So it ranges from like these really intimate moments where you're in a home with one family and their little 4-year-old who's having their birthday party and seeing their favorite character come into their home and say that they're beautiful and brave and smart and courageous and full of magic, and these girls are just looking at you with these wide eyes, to like what we call hug and shove, where you're seeing like hundreds of guests and you're like, wow, thank you, so nice to meet you, let's get a picture, okay, bye. And you have to whip through a ton of guests or like perform a dance in front of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of range to it. What I enjoy the most about it though is like bringing these characters to life in such an accurate way.
Yeah.
And it's down to like, how do they hold their hands when they're waving? How do they sign their name? What accent do they use? What words do they use? Because each has their own vocabulary. How would they stand? How would they walk? And you have to get every detail right to bring the magic to these people. And it's especially rewarding to see the adults believe in magic again when you like commit to the character so much where they like have that suspension of disbelief and believe in magic again.
I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, that's it's sweet, it's heartfelt, so good. I guess, how does that, I guess, how would you say that relates to like a book even?
Yeah. So character study is such an important part of it for me. And you, beyond like the physicalities of the character, have to really know their motivations and how they would respond to things. Because you never know what guests will give to you. So you have to be so deeply rooted in the character that you can behave as they would. So it's that character study that's so important. Just like when Brendan develops a character, he has to go beyond like, what's their name? What's their rank? Like, what do they want out of life? What do they, what are they looking for?
It's even harder for you because like as an author, I get to plan out the responses to things and stuff, but like anytime a child is involved with anything, the absolute chaos that can come out of the question.
Cinderella, my parents died too last year, and it's like, oh,
you need to like be able to respond to that in character, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how do you respond to that? I guess, like, what's a good way
Yeah.
to go
So
about
of
it?
course, like trying to bring myself into her accent, like, oh my goodness, dear, I'm sure that was so difficult for you, but I see that you've really been so brave, and I can see that you're still treating others with kindness, and I'm sure they'd just be so very proud of you right now. And you cusp their little
Yeah.
cheek and give them the deepest hug. And the rule is you can never end the hug first. It has to be the child. So they
Okay.
get the hug as long as they want.
I mean,
Unless you're doing hug and shove, then you have
Yeah, I mean that. Like when it's a party, sometimes the kids will just nestle up and stay in
Yeah.
that hug for minutes because that's just what they need right then.
I mean, but that's so sweet because like, that might change a child's life.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
maybe that memory
Yeah.
inspires them to help children in their own career.
Yes.
someday.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
that's the hope, is that they know that they're deeply loved and they're so valued for just being who they are,
Yeah.
and that they can carry that confidence that, like, my favorite character loves me, so I can love other people like that.
I mean, you should be proud of yourself because that's awesome. That is legitimately
It's
awesome.
really rewarding. So that's
Yeah.
why I've been doing it for as long as I have. Yeah.
Sweet. That's super cool. Super cool. Love that. Yeah, that's good. Sorry, I'm just sitting with that for a moment because that's pretty cool. Yeah, and then definitely want to learn a little bit about the books too, Brendan. So
Yeah.
as an author myself,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different type of storytelling because I have this funny thing we always talk about as authors. We're like, we will have this very eloquent phrase, and then they're like, "Why are you a mumbling idiot in person?" But it's like, because we have this time to be able to tell the story. And storytelling is this interesting thing because, you know, there's things like for 3x structure and a million other things you can study, but when you're crafting a story, there's no yeah, it never turns out exactly how you plan it. And it's kind of a combination of whether you're plotting it ahead of time or you're just what we call discovery writing or pantsing, because you're flying by the seat of your pants.
sure. I like that phrase.
It uncovers a little bit differently no matter how you do it, because we joke that like you're looking through a flashlight and trying to, you know, we're discovering the story as we go with it. And so it's always that interesting thing of like, we run into moments like with anyone else, like when you're reading a book, you have that moment, you're like, oh wow, that happened. Like the author, sometimes we run into it and like, oh, that's a really good idea. And then I have to like go back and plant the seeds to allow that to happen, because like you can't just Deus Ex Machina it at the end and all of a sudden like, where did this dude come from that saved everything? So storytelling is a lot of fun because you get to craft, like, everyone has a different thing. Like some people want to start with the world, some people want to start with the plot itself, and some people want to start with the characters. I tend to start with like just with how I write things. I start with the world, and I say, all right, this is the world. I have these things in the world. What would be happening? And then I can start with like, all right, what kind of characters would be there? What would be their motivations? Why would they start? Because inherently any story, whether it's a romance story, whether it's a fantasy story, whether it's a thriller, there's tension. Tension between characters is what drives it. With romance, you know, it's the characters. Well, are they going to get together? Why won't they get together? Why can't they be? Fantasy, sometimes it ranges between why can't I shoot fire from my hand, or how do I shoot fire from my hand to destroy that big army that's about to conquer us? It's just a fun dynamic process, and it's like, it's the storytelling as itself is just such a big concept that we get to play with as authors, but it's a lot of fun. None of us would do it if it wasn't fun, because it's a lot of work. But
you have to be insane to try.
well, I mean, we all are insane. I mean, if you ever get a group of authors together, like I do at some of these cons and stuff, it's just the amount of things you've looked up to, because like to write a basic thing, you're like, all right, what did they use in this era? Because like anything you're doing, whether it's the modern era, whether it's medieval, whether it's Victorian era, whatever, there's something that you have to look up, and you end up looking. We'll spend hours and hours researching this stuff for one sentence, which just requires a massive amount of insanity. And like, we know everything about how catapults works, and it shows up once.
I mean, I for sure appreciate all of that, because I mean, I know what that's like with the research too, because
But yeah, you know your shows and stuff. And,
yeah, I mean, even with like season 2 of Crusader still, like there were certain lines of dialogue where a character would mention a historical event that happened, and they might mention it in such a way. An example would be my character William describing the siege of Acre. He's talking with one of the other characters about, oh, there's this bloody fight, and I feel guilt over all the innocent people that were slain. You know, and that's, I mean, there's so much research that went into figuring out when did that happen?
Yeah.
What were the details? What would the dialogue be that would correctly reference it to be historically accurate?
That's like the big struggle with like, because like there's like high fantasy and like low fantasy. Where there's stuff that's based in the real world always is the struggle of there. Like you have some things you can change sometimes, but like if you're trying to work within like that structure of that was the date and when that happened, you got to know. And sometimes, you know, there's different history. There might be different perspectives about what happened to that battle too, or like would they know that thing happened, or like and stuff. So it's really interesting to play it. But yeah, you can. It can be helpful in a way because some ways it can guide you because you're limited.
True.
Because you say, okay, I can like this is what happened, so I have to work within that frame. Because when you're creating your own world, like I do, you can almost get like selection paralysis, where it's like, I have so many options, and so sometimes like being able to put those limits on yourself. But even when you create it, it's hard. We're like, why did I say that happened 4 years ago? Now I have to make sure that this thing happens and this, and so it's a fun thing. But that's like, you know, with your shows, when you create anything, whether it's how you're interacting with a kid, with with Andrea's princessing, whether it's writing a show or something like that, it's a dynamic process. There's like we joke that sometimes people get mad when authors say, well, my character made a choice I didn't like, and then all of a sudden like the story changed. And like, well, you control the character. It's like, yes, I controlled how the character's made, but like if I want the plot to do this, but the character wouldn't do it, it's bad writing for me to just say the character's going to do that, because all of a sudden they feel inauthentic. Why is this character all of a sudden betraying someone they never would have betrayed them, or something like that? And so that's what makes the process fun, but also frustrating.
I mean, I appreciate that, because like at a certain point, the characters write themselves.
Well, that's what I mean. That's when like when it comes to building good characters, like with Andrea, when you do good research on your princess, you know kind of like inherently what they would say. That like that's the thing. When I know I need to do more prep sometimes when I'm writing, and like it just doesn't feel like I can get that smoothness. Like either it feels wrong for the character, or I don't understand what the character would do in this situation. It means I need to dig deeper into the understanding of it, because inherently fiction characters should be like a person. We all have our own things of sometimes we all have situations where we don't know what we do and need to, but like being able to balance all that is can be interesting and difficult at times. Especially I have at least 5 point of view characters in my books, so each of them needing them to intertwine sometimes, but also do their own thing just gets complicated.
No, I mean, I appreciate that for sure. I mean, like there's so many fun things about writing, and I'm so glad you mentioned the character choice paralysis, because like I can so relate to that with writing the scripts and stuff, because I think what's been so nice about having historical fiction is that obviously a lot of the characters are made up, and their story largely is something that I brainstormed, but knowing that there's certain historical events that I have to kind of thread a needle. It's like I have to really like carefully craft a story. So I always start with the characters, figuring out who I want to have involved, and then I figure out, okay, which locations would I want them to be in? Like what would make sense for the character of where they would end up? And then I look at like what historical events happened in those places at that time. And then it's just like at that point the story starts to write itself. Like with season 2, for example, with going to rescue the king, I could not figure out how we were going to end the episode. You know, for the longest time I thought, well, they rescued the king and they bring him home, right? Well, no, because that didn't actually happen. So like we had to write it in such a way where the heroes got their win, and yet the king stayed in prison. And the only way that made sense to tell a fictional but interesting and yet plausibly but probably not accurate story is the king literally choosing to stay behind, sort of as like a stubborn honor situation. And that's what it was, is and it works really well within the story.
And if it's consistent with the character, that's what matters. Like if
Yes.
he's like honorable character or something like that, yeah, they can be consistently. You know, an old guy who is honorable. We know old guys can be stubborn, so like that lines up well.
And I think like creativity really shines when there are constraints and you have limitations, and that's when it feels authentic.
And again, the nice thing, like I talked about world building, is like when you're working in the real world, you have to do some world building for like specifics for what you want to do. But like the nice thing is the world's already there. And it makes it easier because you're like, all right, I know the characters that are in this world, or like at least what they'd be like. Like, what would a Frenchman be like who's doing this? Because you would like, all right, this is their background. It makes it a little bit easier to narrow down at least general motivations, and then you can see, all right, how are they unique compared to another person who happens to, because you can have like you know, a common, you know, they always have the common peasant, you know, in a lot of the stories, but like what makes them different than like the other guy from the other village? Like they have things in their life that they, and that almost becomes more relatable than the grander story sometimes to people. Like, yeah, we all care about the invading army, but they also care about his dad's dying from illness and how he's got to save it, or like he needs to get money to be able to pay for food. And so those almost become the most relatable things. And it's fun to weave all those different threads together, because that's how storytelling becomes both grandiose and real to people on a personal level.
I mean, you have to humanize it. And, I mean, that's something I was really conscious of with with my character William. Was, I mean, of course, his main thing is he really, really just wants to regain his honor and not be in exile anymore and return home. You know, so there's sort of a selfish motivation for going to rescue the king, because then that's his path to actually see his beloved family again. But then there's also another element where, I mean, he is a good character, he is a hero, and he does want to help people when he can. And it's kind of like the motivations align in such a way that it becomes sort of this weird gray area of, you know, there's a little bit of selfishness, but also not.
Well, that's, you know, we talk like there's external tension between two people. There's also the internal tension, which is that between different motivations, different ethics, or values, or stuff like that. And that's when I you know, I always find that fun, because that forces the character to make growth or backtracking or something. Like it forces them to change. And because when you have you can write a good story with a static character, but most people want to get some type of change out of the character. Whether they're falling apart because of the battles or something like that, or because they really get that honor and they prove themselves, and then I think that's fun, because it, you know, it just adds to the extra layers of the storytelling, because you have stories about the character, you have the stories about their interactions with people, and then you have their stories about the interaction with the world, and like factions interacting with each other.
Well, and this gets me so excited too, because one of the tools we use for building characters, and I say we, like it's his work, but I love it when he bounces ideas off of me, is the Enneagram, which is a personality profiling system, and it's got like these 9 archetypes for folks based on like what their core fears and motivations are. But I love the Enneagram for character development because it's a fluid system. So when a character is in stress, they're going to shift towards motivations of another type to help protect them. And then when they're like in a security place, they might behave differently because they're pulling from another type. So for example, like it sounds like William, from what I know of his character, would probably be a 1 who's very motivated to do things based on honor and what's right and righteous. When a 1 is stressed, though, they're going to go to the 4, which is core motivation, is to be like known and recognized and seen. But that means that like they might revert to some of the like badder, like the unhealthy traits of 4. I mean, in growth, they feel like liberated to experience joy and like fun and like freedom and all of that. So I like it because it shows that dynamic flow of a person. A person is never static, and a person's always growing and changing and developing and shifting from like stress and security all the time.
And you said like the honor aspect for that. You can have an honorable character who could technically be any of the ones, like any of the numbers, but like why they the nice thing about a tool like Enneagram is it doesn't examine like that they're doing something, it examines why they're doing something.
Exactly, it's the why,
which is what. And which helps when it comes to character creating for consistency, because like for example in Enneagram I'm a 7, And so the fear, which is like part of what we call a fear triad, where it's like if something happens that I'm like uncomfortable or like mostly my inspiration is then to run away from it effectively. Is not to like some would like be like address it with anger.
Address it head on.
An 8, which is like right next to the 7, would go after it head on, usually pretty angry, and like fierce debater with it. While the 7's like freeze up in the corner. I don't want to deal with it. It's not like a passivity, but it's like actively running away from it, or like making a joke or something like that. So it's really interesting to see because each of those, and like she said with the triads you get connected to for like stress and growth and stuff, you can say, all right, I'm forcing my character into this really, really tough situation. And all of a sudden, they're going to respond differently. They respond very differently, and the character looks very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they're the same person, and you get to see either when it's like in real life, if you get pushed into a really stressful situation, you can see people who are like really healthy or real good leaders or stuff like that, and then those who are just like not where they need to be, because stress pushes you to your max, and you can react. How you react to that tends to be different, and that gets interesting because you can force a character to make decisions that are actually aligned with their ethics or their motivations that wouldn't have seemed it if they weren't pushed to that extreme.
And then if you're charting the growth of a character well throughout a season or a series of books, like if a 1 goes to 4 in stress and they're not very developed as a person yet, they're going to pull from the bad sides of 4, but as they develop, they'll pull from the better sides of 4 when they're stressed. Yeah. And like they'll have better responses. It's the same motivation, but they'll be more self-aware and know how they like impact others in the world. So it's really cool to see characters grow in that way too.
And I know we're spitting a lot of numbers at it. If you're curious.
The point is it's motivations and fears, and it's dynamic and it's beautiful and such a powerful tool for character development.
And no tool is like perfect. No. Like Myers-Briggs is another thing. So, but for like, it's just a useful thing, especially for like characters, because again, consistency is, I almost think, one of the most overlooked things when it comes to creating characters. Everyone wants to make them like cool or like hot or like stuff like that. It's just like, but they're not like, what are they doing? Those are all fine things, but it's like you need to know like what they're doing, why they're doing it, and also like why they're not doing things or like what they're avoiding, because like you just go into different levels of things, and this is why we all end up with outlines or character, or we like to call story bibles, that we have like 100 pages of notes about your characters, and then you're like, I'm never going to use half of this, but hopefully it helps me build like some like complete character, and takes it from like a vague outline in the character's mind to like, even if you don't even consider physical descriptions, but you can like picture this person and what they're doing just by what they're reading and how they do things, if that makes sense.
Oh, I can relate to that for sure. And I mean, there's so many background notes about William as a character, for example. Like there's troves of information that kind of influences how those decisions get made in the script writing process. And I mean, the more I sit with the character and the more I try to embrace what he's doing, there are some ways that it pulls back into my own life. It's a fascinating process how that works, I guess.
It's really interesting too, because you with your screenwriting versus like books, the focus is different, and we have like, for example, books, it's much easier for me to reflect on. I can just tell you what the character's thinking. I can just say they can recall something just really quick to inform the reader of that. You can't do that unless you're doing, sometimes I know they do like the thought thing, and it tends to be really weird in shows when the character's thinking this, you're just like, what?
Like you have to show it.
So you have, but for me, I have to like describe each aspect of the room when somebody walks into it, or like what's going on, or like, and just pick the important details. Because I just flood and describe everything, and I was like, but like, nice as a camera, it picks it up. You don't need to tell them anything. The camera tells everything. And so the
scenery's there.
Right. And so it's just fun because it's a different type of like medium for doing things, which is why some people get upset when things don't show exactly like they are in books versus shows. We all do. I'm an author, I understand. But like there's also different mediums like allow for different things, and it's really interesting to see how they appear and how you could, it's like using any other type of art, whether you were using, you know, I'm gonna butcher this, whether you're doing like watercolor versus oil on canvas. I don't know, those are two I know.
I think I'm
but
picking up.
You can't do the same things necessarily through different things.
There's different strengths for different media.
Even if you were to like print out the script and bind it in books, like sometimes people do for stuff, it's not the same thing as prose.
Oh yeah,
prose is not the same thing as that, and so it's just fun to see how different mediums can lead themselves into different types of storytelling.
Sure, absolutely. No, I mean that is like brilliant stuff. So I appreciate you tapping into that and kind of walking the listeners through it, because you know I know there's going to be listeners that appreciate the creative storytelling. I do, because I know we're getting close to where we're about to wrap up here. I did want to call attention to something kind of like fun and I guess interesting about your pen name.
Oh,
So with being Noble, I mean it is awesome how that fits so well with the show in the credits. But even, you know, like how would that pen name look like if you had to shorten it? I think this is
so Andrea brings this up.
Yeah.
It's a joke that I always have with my dad, because my middle name is Samuel. So my middle, you know, a lot of authors would go like JT or something like that, but they do their first and middle initial.
JR.
So yeah, JR token. Yeah. So mine would be BS Noble, which, you know, it's not exactly the. I thought maybe like comedy or something like that would work really well, but a lot of people though with the Noble last name think it's a pen name that I just made up, because people make up pen names all the time. It's like, nope, I just kind of got lucky with the last name.
I mean, it fits so well with the type of books that you write.
Yeah, and so it's great.
I love welcoming people to the Noble household.
Yeah.
Like that's fun.
So Andrea didn't like it enough to take it completely. She had to leave.
Well, I'm a very proud Scot, and if you're a Scot and your last name is Wallace, you have to honor William Wallace.
She's a direct descendant of William Wallace, so you can't.
I mean, I get two really cool last names now. I get Wallace and
I wasn't saying. I think you're so close to your family, and your family's great. They deserve to have that little bit of honor.
And honor that. But when I was in Scotland, I definitely flaunted Wallace. I was the reservation's under Andrea Wallace.
You have.
By the way.
Well, and then when you were in Scotland too, Andrea's got all these different types of plaids and stuff that come with different clan names in Scotland. Tartans, yeah. And then, but she spent the whole time looking for the most obscure type of the Wallace tartan, because she's like, I got the other ones, and they're like, that doesn't exist. They're at this one store, like in this weird crevice of Edinburgh. They're like flipping through this book, like, we got that one. And
I was the only person who requested it that year, but I got it.
I mean, it's nice that you care so much about the lineage and the history, and I mean, you guys were there recently too. Like at the time that we're recording this, you were in Scotland by the time of release. Yeah, it's like a couple months before the podcast will be out. So recently.
So yeah, it was like 2 months ago as of right now, but yeah, in September. So
I mean, like that is like the pictures and the videos you shared. Like it looked like it was an amazing trip. I mean, looked like it was the experience of a lifetime.
It really was. And if anyone wants the itinerary, I love planning it. So just reach out. I would love to share it. And we got a lot done in 2 weeks.
Don't go to Trowbridge.
Oh, that's a whole other story.
What happened? The roads are just very narrow in England, and I'm pretty like confident as a driver, but when it was our first day of driving was on like these super narrow roads going down in the middle of nowhere.
It's my mother's maiden name, so I was like, let's go visit the village of Trowbridge. It's only a 10-minute detour. It was not a 10-minute detour, but we're still alive.
Well, because they say like a road will be 60 miles an hour and you can barely go 20 down it, and like. Yeah, which is the big thing. It's just peripheral visions on this other road. It's try to stick to the highways if you rent a car in England. Yeah. Or take the train. That's my recommendation.
Good to know. Well, hey, I mean, I'm glad you guys had a super fun time on the trip. I mean, like there's so many adventures that you do together. That it really is quite special.
And for storytelling, adventures are, even if it's, don't need to go that far, but any more places you see, the more things you can experience, and it gives you more insights.
I mean, every museum we went into, he lingered and took notes for his book, so take inspiration from everywhere.
I have way too many pictures of flintlock guns for my flintlock fantasy stuff for that museum.
Yeah.
that from one writer to another, I can appreciate just the level of attention.
Yep.
Well, hey, no, that sounds amazing. Then I know we do got to wrap up here, so we'll kind of segue into where the credits music rolls in. But yeah, I really, really appreciate you guys both taking some time to chat, and I certainly, I hope the listeners enjoy it. I really think they will. Yeah, so thanks for.
It's got to be a unique mix.
Yeah.
I like that.
Oh yeah.
You hit all my favorite topics, so I can't.
Briz is
complain.
very excited.
Yeah, Briz is like, wow.
Oh, the
we
cat
got
is-
guests.
She's been, I don't know if she's
She
touched
just woke
you at
up
all,
from
but
the
she's
void.
like, Mom.
Oh, she's been bunting.
Yeah.
My knee.
She just throws herself against your leg.
She's like, you're my best friend. Yeah.
Can I take her home?
She probably wouldn't know. She's smooth brained.
I mean, I would say Brody needs a friend, but he's also a grumpy old man.
Oh,
so he might not go
Brody.
for it. Yeah.
Versus like green off.
Oh, she's cute. All right.
She does not want to be picked up right now, but she's tolerating.
But I'm so glad we were able to do this. I love podcasting,
thank
and
you.
I've never been in a podcast. This is my first
never
podcast.
been in a podcast?
No, Brendan gets to do so many podcasts with his book stuff, but I'm so glad.
Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say most podcasts they're like, "Yeah, do you sell more books from podcasts?" I'm like, nah, I basically just get to chat about my books for an hour. But
It's just fun.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm glad that you guys could join. I mean, I really appreciate it. It's yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to have you guys come chat. And,
Thank you. Thanks for giving us a soapbox for an hour.
Yeah.
If you ever need more content ever,
Oh, we will. we will. So
we're always glad.
sounds good. I will call on you. So sounds good. Well, thanks guys very much. So with that, I'm going to, we're going to do the outro here. And once again, just for the listeners' benefit here, thank you very, very much for tuning in. This is the last podcast of season 2 with the companion podcast episodes for The Tale Continued, pairing with Crusader's Tale. So do stay tuned. Keep an eye out for what's next, because there is more coming. It might be a little bit, but bear with us, and we'll bring some more cool content your way. So with that, thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate you listening.